Hello, thank you so much for clicking this video today. I really appreciate it. It's going to be an exciting one. We're going to be going into Cardano scaling and how we can increase the throughput of the Cardano blockchain and also have more utility here. I'm here with Philip. How are you doing today, Philip?
Great, great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So Philip is the founder of Anastasia Labs, and also one of the founders of Midgard. And I've talked to him a lot in the past, and he's honestly taught me quite a bit in the short conversations that we had. So I felt it would be good to get him on the podcast and kind of dive into Midgard, dive into Cardano right now, a little bit of Midnight, and see where we're going in the future. So just to get started, can you do an introduction to yourself? How did you find Cardano? How did you join this ecosystem?
Yeah, so I was a big into programming language theory. In fact, that's where I worked before Cardano, uh, and there was a lot of Haskell work, and I was looking for Haskell jobs. And yeah, that was sort of the in route. I searched, and it was just all over Haskell forums and subreddits and stuff, and uh, I was interested, and I got a position in the ecosystem, and then from there I was hooked. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I feel like Haskell has been a good way of bringing, some developers over here. I've met a few other people that have kind of mentioned that as well. And then, after you kind of came into the ecosystem, is that around when you started Anastasia Labs?
Yeah, yeah. Originally, it was just a company that I created to take subcontracting work, and yeah, over time, I was getting too much subcontracting work that I couldn't fulfill all these contracts myself. So I started bringing in others, and then it grew to like a 12-person plus company.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a nice organic start. How I met Phil here. We had been working on the staking basket smart contract for a while, and we were planning on open sourcing it, which has been done now. But he reached out to us and mentioned that they do audits, for people that are open sourcing smart contract work. So I do appreciate you doing that for us. And throughout that time, you're doing a lot of audits. You're doing contracting work for people. Eventually, you came up with the idea for Midgard. What is Midgard?
Yeah, so Midgard is an optimistic rollup, a layer two for Cardano, and sort of the design philosophy and difference from Hydra is that Midgard is supposed to be one, it's designed to inherit the security of Cardano and be economically dependent on Cardano, and two, it's supposed to be as close to an L1 experience as you can emulate in an L2. And this means that it's suited for things like large scale user applications like DEXs and lending applications and the same DeFi apps that users use on the layer one, things like Atrium.
Awesome. So, kind of dive into, roll ups a little bit. Is it essentially, you have this second chain that's living kind of on top of the layer one. It's using the layer one for security. And then it's taking a bunch of transactions and then rolling them up at some interval and then placing them on the layer one. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Awesome. So, maybe it's a bit early to, ask a question like this, but, what is that interval? How many transactions can kind of be rolled up, into one transaction and put on the Cardano blockchain?
Right. So it's actually pretty unbounded. So you could have 800 transactions in a state commitment, or you could have 10,000, or you could have 50,000. The real limiting factor is the hardware of operators. So yeah, if basically, collectively we decide we want to support something like 2,000 TPS or 10,000 TPS, then we set the hardware requirements accordingly, and then that's what we'll be able to support.
Okay. So when it comes to actually submitting all of those transactions on the Cardano blockchain, are you submitting like a proof that all of those transactions happened and settled onto the blockchain?
Right. So there are two types of rollups. There are ZK rollups and optimistic rollups. And ZK rollups submit a proof. And that basically means the second it makes its way, the state commitment, which is, it's like, you can think of it as like a block, right? The second it makes its way from the L2 to Cardano, it's immediately finalized. And everything in that state commitment, is correct and valid. And that's like, yeah, it's submitting a proof, basically, a proof that, all these transactions are valid and whatnot. What Midgard is an optimistic rollup. So it doesn't submit a proof of these transactions. It just publishes them to the layer one, like a commitment to these transactions. And then the security of the system relies on something called fault proofs, where essentially anyone can come in. You don't have to be an operator, and submit a fault proof to say, there's a double spend in this block, or just anything, any ledger rule that is violated. They can just submit a proof that it's violated, and that block gets destroyed. And whoever submitted that block gets punished. They lose their bond and get kicked from the operator set.
Okay.
And yeah, the reason for this, that we opted to go optimistic, is because with ZK, you get the benefit of not having to deal with fault proofs, but you're constrained on throughput. It no longer becomes you can include 50,000 transactions or whatever the hardware can support in a block. It becomes you're limited by the L1's ability to validate all these proofs. And there's over time, there's going to continuously be improvements to these ZK proof systems. And eventually, far in the future, there'll be like some, perfect ZK proof system that can support all the throughput that we'd need and whatnot, and we can transition at that point. But yeah, sort of the issue with ZK systems now is that it's such an active field of research that about every 6 months, a new ZK proof system comes out. And that means that, if I build a chain using some standard now, in 8 months, that standard will be completely considered obsolete, and I'll have to sort of rewrite Midgard for it, which just, isn't really feasible for now.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, with Midgard, who is actually running the chain? Because you're obviously still relying on SPOs, running the layer one, but who's running kind of the layer two?
Right. So Midgard has its own operator set, and anyone can become an operator. It's actually who is an operator is determined on the Cardano L1. So on the Cardano L1, there's a smart contract which manages the set of operators, and you just join this smart contract to become an operator.
Okay.
And you can view all these operators. We're going to have a nice chain explorer that will show you who all the current operators are and the block producing schedule.
How do those guys get paid? Because I understand that there's no token with Midgard.
Right. So how they get paid, essentially the same way Cardano SPOs do, except it's not amortized. Sorry.
It's okay. I've got a couple dogs right there too. They're just being nice today.
Right. So they get paid based on the transactions that they publish to the layer one. So
Okay.
in the same way that Cardano SPOs get paid from fee revenue, they get paid from fee revenue. But the Cardano L1, the fee revenue is sort of a very small part of SPO rewards. And this is because the L1 throughput is pretty limited. So even if you have a full block, right? Even if you have a full block for every block in an epoch, it still won't be sufficient to pay the operating costs of these nodes. The difference with Midgard is because throughput's unbounded, you could have 50,000 transactions, 5,000 transactions, etc. Each one with an individual fee. So this sort of upper limit on the amount of fee revenue you can make doesn't really exist in the same way. And yeah, so this is the revenue model for operators.
That makes sense. From a user side, just some normal guy that uses Cardano, what would that look like using Midgard? Is this kind of clicking a button, in their wallet to change network, or are they just, clicking a button to kind of sign the transaction and it'll automatically switch?
Yeah, so for now, in the future, the goal is to make it more seamless
Yeah.
and make it so that the user doesn't even have to know whether they're on Midgard or the L1. And this is something that's very possible. But for the MVP release, there'll be a toggle in your wallet where you can switch from Cardano to Midgard, and it will be as seamless as doing that within basically any Cardano wallet and transacting the exact same way they would on Cardano with the exact same applications they use. So, for instance, if they use some DEX, it'll be on Midgard, and they'll be able to click a button in their wallet and just interact with that DEX with much higher throughput and much lower fees.
Okay. So, on the user side, a user is going to be kind of paying less fees. They'll have higher throughput. When it comes to, launching, Midgard, I've heard of, Sundial. There's been a big focus on kind of bringing Bitcoin to Cardano and, giving people opportunities to take out loans, on the Bitcoin or get some yield in some sense. One thing that really interested me in Midgard is the fact that you'll have these kind of specialized layer twos, for certain use cases. And you mentioned to me in the past that they're kind of inoperable with each other, which is quite unique because, what I've seen, on Ethereum and other blockchains is you have all of these layer twos, but you're kind of spreading that liquidity too far and wide. So there's a huge amount of, slippage on all of these chains. How does Midgard do that? And then what are some of the, kind of specialized layer twos that you can foresee launching, using Midgard?
Right. Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head. Like a lot of what we do is observe other ecosystems. Like we use Ethereum, we use Solana, we use Sui uh, to, and we're very familiar with these ecosystems to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
What is attracting users and volume, and what are people constantly complaining about? And what they're constantly complaining about in Ethereum is exactly what you said, that each L2 feels like like it's an isolated ecosystem. So to go from Arbitrum to Optimism is non-trivial. It feels like you're on a different network, right? You can't just like hit a toggle in your wallet. You have to go to a bridge application. You have to do all of this stuff. You have to add these networks in your wallet, and the same apps that you use might not exist. So the reason this came to exist is not really a technical issue; it's a social issue. There were early on, there were many different L2s on Ethereum, and they all sort of have their own frameworks for interoperability. And each of these L2s aggressively lobbied and pushed the market to try to use their interoperability framework. So there's like an Optimism one, an Arbitrum one, a Polygon one, etc. And the issue with having so many of these is that because everyone's not using the same one, everyone is still isolated, right? Even if you have
Yeah.
the system, if everyone's using their own, it doesn't matter at the end of the day because users can't transition between them. So here, the nice thing about the fact that there are no L2s on Cardano is that we can establish this as a standard for interoperability. And basically, any L2 that launches on the Midgard stack will have native interoperability with any of the other L2s, which means you don't need to go to a bridge application. You don't need to mess with your wallet or configuration. You can just natively transfer between these L2s, and all the value will display in your wallet seamlessly. So yeah, I think this is actually one of the points where sort of this observation was very helpful of other ecosystems because it's a clear, concrete criteria where rollups on Cardano and L2s on Cardano can be strictly better than L2s on Ethereum by having this unified ecosystem and avoiding this UX fragmentation problem that is sort of plagued Ethereum. Like if you look at what people complain about, that's basically number one in Ethereum. They're like, L2s are great. We get fast transactions and it's cheap, but this ecosystem kind of sucks because the UX of going through all these different L2s and managing 100 different wallets from 100 different L2s is horrendous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
even the slippage on the layer one, is quite expensive. Even if you're trying to transact 5 or 10K in USTC for a token, even on the L1 with a larger amount of liquidity than a lot of L2s, the fees are still, really high on that side.
yep, yep.
So, as far as, Midgard's rollout, are you guys working with any, dexes to kind of launch a specialized kind of swapping, version of Midgard?
Yeah, so basically every DApp that you're familiar with on Cardano will exist on Midgard. So we've talked to basically all the major dexes, lending platforms, etc. We're priming them. When we get pre-prod up, they'll all be there. We'll have them deploy. We'll help them make small adjustments that they need to their current configuration. And yeah, you'll be able to use the same applications you use today on the Cardano L1. But specifically with respect to that question, will there be a custom deployment tailored for DEXs? This is very interesting. This is essentially what like the Uniswap app chain is, or what
Yeah.
Hyperliquid is, right? It's a custom network that has DeFi primitives built into the network layer, and this allows them to sort of succeed in the market or be the best in the market in that domain, right? Because if you have
Hmm.
a ledger where everything is custom built around a DEX or around some DeFi application, then of course, it has a huge advantage in that domain with respect to L1s or other L2s. So I do expect to see this, and it's something I'm very excited about, especially when you look at like the success of Hyperliquid or of the Uniswap chain. I
Yeah.
think that yeah, for a lot of reasons, L2s are very appealing because for when you get big enough, right, it becomes very hard to make a compelling business case to like a bank, for instance, of why you should deploy on an L1. Like if you want Chase Bank to have, they decide all of a sudden, we want to use blockchain. We want to deploy an application and allow transfers via cryptocurrency for between Chase Bank accounts or whatever. They're likely not going to do this on the layer one because they'll have higher ups that will essentially give them a list of business requirements that will be difficult to satisfy on a layer one, or the fees would be too high, or some throughput constraint, or they need some special primitives or something, some special configurations or rules in the ledger to enable their use case. And this is sort of where layer twos come into play. Otherwise, what they're going to do is they're going to go build a Chase Bank L1, right? And if someone says, oh, Cardano is great, I really like the fact that it has 100% uptime and mission critical levels of security, but they're like, but we can't launch here because of XYZ criteria or XYZ features that we need. Instead of saying, okay, well, now we have to launch our own L1, what we can pitch them is you can launch an L2 and deploy in the Cardano ecosystem and essentially deploy and be on Cardano, right?
Yeah.
But all your custom features that you need and all the throughput requirements can be satisfied. And you can have control of your own mini network while still maintaining the network effects of Cardano and being within the ecosystem, having access to that liquidity and user base and 100%, liveness record, etc.
Yeah. That's honestly the direction that I've expected, nation states to go. As you mentioned, larger institutions like banks, because they do kind of have those key requirements there. If Ethiopia, for example, wanted to use blockchain services, they're going to want, clawbacks or their own business requirements ultimately. So I definitely see the value there that layer twos provide to those institutions, and maybe eventually even nation states. This year has been a real exciting year for Cardano because it's become fully decentralized. And, I know that you're a D rep. I know that you guys also got some funding for Midgard from the Treasury. I just I wanted to hear your thoughts on being a D-rep. How do you think Cardano governance is going so far? Where would you like to see it go? And what's your experience been as a D-rep for Cardano?
Yeah, it's been great. I'm really thankful for the massive amount of support that I have from the community and delegation, and yeah, it feels nice to have so many people put their faith into me. Um, I think that the current state of Cardano governance, there's a lot of kinks to be ironed out. There's a lot of things that are just like a complete pain in the ass, like the fact that the stuff doesn't appear in your wallet. So like you have to go to GovTools or go to some Tempo or some external platform to go see what the current proposals are and whatnot. But at the end of the day, when you compare Cardano, the state of governance of Cardano to other ecosystems, it's like a night and day difference.
Hmm.
The fact that people now can come in, uh, anyone who holds Zeta can come in and express their voice for the future of the chain tangibly, right? Not just say I want this. They can say we are getting this. You put in a proposal, and if the stake supports it, that will happen. So for the first time ever, basically, the entire roadmap, everything of Cardano is directly controlled by the community and by ADA holders. And this is something that doesn't exist to any at this scale in any other ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
When you're like, as I said earlier, right, we spend a lot of time in other ecosystems, and the thing you'll notice is, if you want a feature release in Ethereum, it is impossible to get. You could be the most competent developer ever. You could have a very successful project, and say you have some proposal for like, okay, let's do this on the Ethereum L1. Let's add this feature, uh, change the ledger in this way. If you're not part of the in group, which is sort of the core developers, you will never ever get this done, right? You'll have to lobby like crazy, get billions of dollars to go essentially do political lobbying of like going to core developers and treating them like congressmen and just giving them money. Um, and yeah, it's not feasible. Like the whole roadmap is controlled by core devs, and it's the same with basically most other L1 chains. And this means, even if the community collectively is saying, "Hey, we want this. This is, a feature that we need," and they have like, years of tangible evidence of this, of some issue existing, it won't happen. There's no guarantee that it'll happen unless the core devs decide they want it, right? And often you
Yeah.
wind up in situations where core developers are very opinionated. They've been working on the chain for like years and years, so they think of it as like their kid, and they're very resistant to change or ideas that weren't proposed by them or that they don't like. And you can't really have like the future of a decentralized ecosystem in the hands of like less than 20 developers, right? It's just it's very dangerous. So I think that, yeah, while there are issues with the state of governance on Cardano now, it, even with its issues, it's like a night and day difference from anything else, right?
Yeah, I think that you're, watching your growth in Cardano kind of really supports, the decentralized nature of the ecosystem. I mean, you found the blockchain, because you're interested in Haskell. And, from then, you came up with an idea to increase Cardano's throughput and scaling. And then you rallied, an entire community of people to support you. And, just 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe you didn't even know about the blockchain. So to me, it kind of shows that, an individual, with ideas can come to this community of people and make positive changes, which is, one of the main reasons that a lot of people are open to the idea of blockchain in the first place, because there's this feeling that they can't have a meaningful change or impact on the society in which they exist in. And, blockchain, at least in the beginning, that was the hope is, a new system that, somebody can actually change, for the better, because we lack that in the real world. And, kind of seeing your story really speaks to that. So while there are, of course, some problems in early governance, it's nice to see it, doing what it was meant to do. Right. And, allowing people to, empower themselves and the people around them to make positive changes. When it comes to governance, is there any kind of big changes, to the protocol that you would like to see, over the next year? Does Midgard require any changes?
Yeah, it doesn't really require anything. We have everything we need to launch, but there are a number of things that would heavily benefit Midgard.
Yeah.
Things like Laos blobs, and this is something I'm pushing for heavily, and that I'm very excited about. And yeah, for those of you that don't know, Laos is a vertical scaling solution for Cardano that allows nodes to take full advantage of their hardware to increase the throughput of Cardano without sacrificing decentralization. It's something that the whole community is very excited for, but it's very technologically complex. In blockchain, typically, you have this trilemma where you can't really achieve any of these verticals without sacrificing some of the other verticals. So Laos is a way to achieve multiple verticals without sacrifice, at least in its current proposal. And this will allow us to improve the throughput of the chain significantly without losing anything with respect to security or decentralization. But because of that, it is extremely complex. And the end-to-end Laos implementation will take a very long time. And why I'm pushing for Laos blobs is it's a phased release. It allows us to make progress towards Laos directly on the L1, right? Instead of just, building Laos in a silo for like however long it takes, and then having to, have all the tooling update and everything, all of this, happen at one big release. The proposal for Laos blobs essentially says, let's introduce Laos, but not for transactions, for data to the L1, so that one tooling can update and slowly adjust to Laos and the consensus, etc., and the IB blocks and whatnot. And two, we have incremental progress that is actually pushed to the chain and committed to, that users can give feedback on, which is very important, right? When you develop things in a silo, it can become very dangerous because even if you basically come up with an idea, you implement it, and even if you implement it perfectly with respect to the idea you came up with, right? It's like you think of something, you materialize it, right? You actually build it. Even if you built exactly what you proposed, and everything works perfectly with respect to how you envisioned it, you don't know how users or the market will perceive that, right? They might say, when it goes out into the market after a ton of user feedback, like we would wish this was different, or we would want to change this, etc. And that's where phased releases really helps. It allows you to sort of make progress very quickly by releasing in small steps, getting feedback, iterating on it, and then you at the end you get the perfect product based on market feedback, as opposed to just trying to build the perfect product by yourself in a silo. So this is something I'm very much excited for. I also think there's a lot that we can do with respect to just tweaking parameters on the chain. I'm very excited for this. Now we can start, increasing the block size or memory units or execution budget or anything. I think even just tweaking all of this stuff can have a significant impact on usability of the chain, reducing minata, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even the small block size increase that we got in the past, you could notice the difference,
Right.
very quickly. And I agree. I think Cardano's kind of reached this point where that is what we need, is kind of these small kind of development updates, gather some feedback instead of kind of developing for years in silo, which was the, model that kind of brought us the Cardano that we know today. And even on the Atrium side, I mean, that's kind of the way that we're looking at development. We were working on big things for so long, and now we're switching to, shipping small pieces at a time, gathering market feedback. I also, one thing I wanted to ask is, when do you think we'll see Midnight, live on the
Midgard.
Cardano blockchain? Or yeah, Midgard, sorry.
Yeah, so we're looking at Q2 of next year is when we
Okay.
will have it live on mainnet, which is quite exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, long before then, there'll be a pre-prod that people will be able to interact with their Cardano pre-prod wallets, etc.
Yeah, I saw that you guys were doing some work with the Midnight team as well, helping them facilitate the airdrop. What are your thoughts on Midnight? How does that fit in with Midgard, and what was some of the work you were doing over there?
Yeah, so we helped out with the glacier draw,
Yeah.
and yeah, in general, there's a lot of really cool things about Midnight, and there's a lot of really cool things about the glacier draw. One of the biggest issues with POS networks is initial distribution. It's very hard to do a fair initial distribution. And the same thing is true for sidechains or L2s if you have a token. And Midnight essentially solves this by having an airdrop, but a non-traditional airdrop. So typically, like L2s that have tokens, what they'll do is have an airdrop based on user interaction with the L2, right? They'll basically say this is like an incentivized activity phase, and they'll not announce the criteria for receiving the airdrop, but they'll just say you have to use the network, and then people will go do everything basically on the network, do a ton of transactions to try to farm these airdrops. And the first time this happened, it worked, but the issue was people very quickly sort of created a meta around this, around airdrop farming, and it made bots and everything to just sort of do all these transactions, et cetera, on these networks themselves, which breaks the security of the airdrops, because the whole point is for a fair distribution to actual users, and not just to have the token go to two guys who are running 10,000 bots to go
Yeah,
farm
but
it.
then dump it all.
Right. So Midnight solves this by basically just doing, instead of a specialized airdrop for people using the network, it's an airdrop to anyone that holds 8 major cryptocurrencies, which it gets a lot of goodwill from different communities. Like typically, it's very hard to interact with other communities. There's like a lot of maximalism and siloing that to the so far that, like, if you go on Twitter, like if you have an Ethereum account, you'll only see Ethereum people. If you have a Solana account, you'll only see Solana people, etc. And yeah, of course, this is like a social media thing in general, but you can very quickly become like, I will never interact with any other ecosystem, because all you're seeing is stuff saying my ecosystem is the best. And this makes an attempt to unify these ecosystems by just giving people free money, basically. If you have those tokens, you get a ton of NIGHT. Now, there's no reason not to try and interact with it and its interoperability properties, and sort of create a more multi-chain crypto ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it has a big benefit of getting a lot of KOLs, a vested interest in the future of the chain. And that's one of the most important economic indicators for the success of a chain is, are there a lot of influential people holding the token? So yeah, it's very exciting. I think it can work for L2s that do want to do a token, or partner chains that would want to do a token. I think essentially it could be reused to do airdrops in a more fair, equitable way. I also think that the actual Midnight network is very interesting. Selective disclosure, where it's a privacy network where you get to choose what's private, right? Things like Monero, there's a lot of privacy networks, but traditionally, it's all when they're focused on privacy, everything's private, right? That's the goal. But there's a lot of use cases where you need stuff to be public and stuff to be private, even with smart contracts. Like sometimes you want the contract itself to be public. Sometimes you want certain information in the contract to be public, uh, and some information to be private. And this is what Midnight specializes in, selectively allowing you to choose what information you want to be public or private in your application. And the tokenomics, I think, also are very, very probably the most interesting thing to me.
Yeah,
This is
same
based
here.
on a research paper that I think IO published. Their tokenomic model has two tokens: one, the night token, and two, the dust token. And dust acts like energy does in the real world. It disappears if you don't use it, right? So you have generators that generate electricity, and then you have to use it, or it disappears. You can't just like hold electricity, right? It's not like a dollar bill or something. And this incentivizes use of the network, because the dust
Hmm.
token degrades over time if you don't use it. There's no reason for you not to use the network and interact with applications. And this is one of the most challenging problems for blockchain, because a lot of people consider, when they buy an L1 token, they consider this as an investment vehicle, right? They'll buy some L1 token with the intention of holding it and making money from it. And this isn't a bad thing, but the incentives are misaligned, because for the L1 token to make money, you need the network to become important, for applications to rely on it, for there to be a lot of users of the network, right? But if everyone is buying the token and holding it, and they don't want, and using the network itself requires you to pay that token as a fee to interact with the network, then you have inverse incentives, where on one side, you want people to interact with the network because that's what will cause demand for the token to go up. But on the other hand, you yourself don't want to interact with the network, because every time you do, you have to pay a fee, and you're losing your investment. And with Midnight, the L1 token is the night token, and this token is what generates dust, which is the transaction fee token. So you don't interacting with the network does not punish you. You don't have to pay a fee in your L1 investment, in your initial investment in the night token. You'll always maintain your night tokens as long as you don't sell them, and you spend your dust token to transact on the network, which means you get a lot of these KPIs that are very hard to achieve in traditional blockchains very easily, because there's no reason for you to not use the network. You have dust
Hmm.
tokens sitting in your wallet. You know you're generating it with your night token. So if you use it and transact on the network, say I have 5,000 dust or whatever, right? I do a ton of transactions on the network, interact with a ton of applications. Now I have 0 dust. Well, over time, I'll get 5,000 dust again. It'll go back up to the capacity of however much night tokens you have. So for some set amount of night tokens, you'll be able to generate X amount of dust per day or whatever.
Yeah.
And the limit will be X. So if I just keep it in my wallet, I'm not going to generate, X the first day and then another X the next day. Like I won't have 800 dust and then 1600 dust or whatever. I'll just have 800 dust. But if I use it all and I have 0 dust, then I'll go back to 800 dust.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that, this is actually going to be incredible, because people don't realize how important these KPIs are, how important active users are, and how much of a barrier to usage the fact that you have to pay in your investment vehicle, right? Because for users, it is like you think about it every time you're doing it, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to, this is free to me. I'm just going to transact on the network.
Yeah, it's creating a taxable event. You can almost like it's analogous with, let's say you have a bunch of Microsoft shares and you're required to pay for Windows, using Microsoft shares. So you're creating a taxable event every time that you do it. And another thing that's interesting to me is I could see a world where you have a lot of these people that aren't using the network, but they're large investors of the network, and they're essentially, renting their dust to applications. imagine we were doing a big campaign or marketing event for a new app that's launching, a new DEX, for example, and you can just say, okay, we've partnered with a bunch of night holders and investors. We've paid them, X amount of money. So all of our transactions for the next 3 months are going to be free because they're all covered, by all of these individuals. So, I think the tokenomics model is really clever. I think the distribution, all of the tokens of 8 different blockchains is really clever as well. And the incentive to use the blockchain rather than the disincentive is really smart. And it's not something that we've really seen anywhere else.
Right. Yeah. If you're, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head again. If you're someone who wants to buy the L1 token as an investment vehicle and you don't want to interact with applications, this system is still better for you because now you can make even more yield by selling your dust generating capacity because essentially your night is generating the fee token. And if you're saying, okay, well, there's nothing that I want to do on, I don't want to transact on the Midnight Network for now. I'm buying this as an investment vehicle. Then you will be making a source of revenue. You'll be able to make a source of revenue by doing exactly what you said and just selling out that capacity for others who do want to use the network. And they benefit as well because they, it's much cheaper than buying an L1 token yourself and then continuously spending that L1 token and having to go buy it again. If they just go to you and say, for 6 months, I want my transactions to be covered on the network, right, up to this capacity. It's benefits both sides. So yeah, I think it's very exciting, and it sort of hasn't been done anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, we've this podcast has been informative. Is there anything that we didn't cover so far that you want to get out there before we head off for the day?
No, yeah, it's been great. I'm very, I think what you guys are doing with Atrium is amazing. I think people are going to catch on very quickly the value of this type of token, and I think that it's an example of a protocol that is novel to Cardano. It doesn't you don't have these protocols elsewhere. I know it's been compared to like liquid staking protocols, but it's a liquid staking. It's more than a liquid staking protocol. It's a liquid staking protocol that benefits the decentralization of the network and the resilience of the network because of the basket logic and how you can have 50 different SPOs that are receiving your delegation or your stake.
Yeah, I because it is novel, I think it's harder for people to understand at first, right? Because the way a lot of people kind of look at new things is, oh, it's like this other thing that I've used before on this other chain or network. It's another DEX. So it will take some time to catch on, but we've got a bunch of users in there already loving it. We're seeing some growth day by day. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and kind of teaching us more about Midgard. I'm excited for the launch of it. I'm also excited to see the launch of the test net. And I'm excited to see Cardano continue to scale without sacrificing decentralization. For anybody just tuning in today, thank you so much. If you made it to the end, comment Midgard down below to let us know you made it till the end. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I'll see you.
Have a nice one, you guys.